Welcome. My name is Aaron Walker, founder of Camelback Ventures, and I'm really excited to have this conversation in celebration of Camelback's 10-year anniversary. We've got a couple fellows with us, Tran Neville and Larry Irvin, who are two Camelback fellows who are leading two amazing organizations that we're going to talk a little bit more about them and their stories and how do you get to 10? How do you get to 10 years leading an organization? So we're just going to jump right into it. Does that sound good?
Sounds great.
Yeah, sounds good, Aaron. Ready to go.
Excellent. So just to let everyone know who you are, can you just each take 30 seconds? Who are you? Where are you? How'd you get here? Well, let's start with Larry.
Okay, Larry Irvin, in New Orleans, born and raised in New Orleans. How did I get here? That's a much more elaborate answer that I'll probably, dissect through this conversation. But, our premise at Brothers in Power to Teach, we're looking to increase the number of Black men in the K-12 spaces, leading from an intellectual capacity as educators. We've been doing it for 10 plus years now, and really excited to be here, Aaron. This journey, it's been an up and down one, and peaks and valleys, and wins and losses, and I'm excited, man, and honored to be here today.
Definitely. We're going to talk about some of those peaks and valleys and wins and losses. Tina, what about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Tina, and today I'm calling in from the Netherlands. So my husband is in the Foreign Service, so we move every few years. And I feel like every time I'm talking to you, it's like, oh, this time I'm in the Netherlands. Last time I was in Thailand. But today I'm calling in from the Netherlands. So I lead a company called Lana Learn, and we empower communities through education and training. So I'm very excited to talk about the last 10 plus years and the ups and the downs. And we're at an up right now, and I'm just so proud to celebrate that, as well as Camelback celebrating your 10 years as well.
Awesome. I'm gonna stay with you for a second to get the conversation going, Tina.
Cool.
What's the inspiration for Lana Learn? Like, why are you doing this?
Yeah, so my personal story is I was born in Vietnam, and my family were refugees from Vietnam to the US. So I came when I was a year and a half with my little sister and my two parents. And you can imagine, as other child of immigrants and refugees, you don't know very much in America. You're just trying to figure it out. And so growing up, I had to figure out a lot for myself. And so when I went to college, the first in my family, in graduate school, the first in my family, joined the U.S. Foreign Service, so was a diplomat overseas. It was really wonderful, but I wanted to return to education because I really do believe that knowledge is power. The more you know, the more that you can help yourself, your family, your community, and other people. So Lana Learn has always been about knowledge sharing and service to support communities.
Awesome. What about you, Larry? Why'd you start Brothers in Power to Teach? What was the inspiration?
Once again, there's a lot of variables. I have a colorful story, Aaron. I didn't go looking for to start a nonprofit or entrepreneurship. In a lot of regards, this mission and vision found me. So I met my co-founder, Christina, Mardi Gras 2011, told her about my story. I grew up in New Orleans. My mom was an educator as well, so that's one layer I've always sort of seen from inside the storm, if you will. She was a teacher's teacher, and her impact spilled outside the classroom into the community. So I've seen that level of benevolence and altruism from my mom, and she always begged me to be an educator, but I did everything I could to not go down that path. Like myself, like many other young Black men who grew up in inner cities and in New Orleans, the crime element, the criminal element was one that was very, ubiquitous and accessible for me, and I made a couple mistakes that landed me in jail and with charges and things of that nature. And I think I had a lot of variables around me, Aaron, that put me in a certain position to where I had to entertain an opportunity like lead a nonprofit organization. So my criminal background didn't allow me to use my education. You know, I have a journalism background, graduated from Delgado in print broadcast journalism, graduated from LSU in communication studies, rhetorical theory, and public address. But post graduation, I wasn't able to use those degrees because of some of the criminal charges that I had. And I think that was one of the big variables that put me in a space to where I had to really entertain and be creative in regards to how I'm going to sustain as a young man. And that's just some of the layering of my story. But I think I've always been in training, if you will, to lead this work, to tell this story. Like I said, with my mom's influence, her being an educator, and her putting that piece, her instilling that piece in me, and then the anecdotal experience that I had growing up as a Black male in New Orleans, and seeing that tug and pull and grappling with the same identity issues and consciousness issues that a lot of Black men face, man. Like, who am I growing up? I saw a lot of negative representations in the street, and my cousins and friends, and going to jail, and even myself as well. But now, and I was always grappling, that kind of stark contrast in narratives and impact that I had. I had my mom on one end, setting a very positive foundation as far as education. I was always strong academically, but then I had this other force of nature, if you will, which was New Orleans, the city of New Orleans, and being a Black male and being surrounded and being in a certain environment. And I think having the balance of those experiences have really molded me to tell the story and lead this work.
Yeah. What is your mom? I hope she's with us when I ask this question. But what does she think of your work now? I mean,
my mom passed away in 2010. Okay. So, but her spirit and her spirit still walks with me, and I'm reminded by my family, my immediate family, my extended family, of how proud she would be of me. And I just know she's watching, she's seeing, and she's walking with me. None of this would be possible without that influence.
What part of this work do you think she'd be most proud of?
The public speaking. The public speaking, hands down. That's not something we had a lot of in our family. And I think just in general, right? A lot of people have that fear of public speaking, and it's something that, and I had the same thing as one of the probably my biggest development gaps as a leader, honestly, as a social justice leader, was my biggest hurdle was getting over the fear of public speaking. There was no way we were going to be able to be successful doing this work. And I mean, initially coming in at the inception, I was afraid to lead, and public speaking was part of that. And I think overcoming that hurdle, and now it being a strength for me, is definitely something that she'll be extremely proud of.
No, I could see that. Tina, for you, one of the things that, when I started Camelback, we talked a lot about coaching and capital and connections, and I think that's still a part of the value of what Camelbacks bring to the table. When you think about these 10 years, how would you describe your journey around raising money in that capital piece?
Yeah. Well, first, I just really want to thank Camelback, because Aaron, in your early years, and I was part of one of the early cohorts, you always described Camelback as being the day one believer in each mission. And thank you, sir. I mean, if it wasn't for Camelback, I don't know if we would be having this conversation. And it wasn't just day one. It was also during COVID 4 years ago. This is related to the capital question. And just frankly, being an entrepreneur question 10 years plus now, during COVID, when, Lana Learn works with schools. So when schools shut down because COVID forces everyone online and schools are trying to survive, they're not working with outside organizations. They're just trying to figure out how it worked. And so at that time, we didn't have very much work. And so we had to apply for the PPP loan, like a lot of other companies and nonprofits out there. And I had a really hard time figuring out how that process works. But it was actually you and Camelback who helped our fellows be able to access that capital that Lana Learn needed to survive during that time. And so I want to thank you for day one. I want to thank you for COVID and connecting with PPP. I want to celebrate that Want to Learn is doing better than we ever have right now. And I really want to thank Camelback for that. In terms of the access to capital, it's been pretty difficult as a woman, as someone who doesn't come from generational wealth. I know how to hustle, but it's not readily available, so I've had to learn. But having a wonderful network like Camelback and all the other networks I've built because of and on top of, we're in a better situation right now if we were to access capital later on.
You said it's really exciting to see what you've done, and you saying that I Want to Learn is doing better than ever. Let's talk a little bit about that. Like, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So what I think, sir, you have, and I use the word sir, guys, because I'm from Oklahoma. We say sir out of respect, and I actually probably say sir more because I work with the military more now. That's like one of our recent contracts. But I think early on it was college apps, and then I think it became Transcend Academy, and then Want to Learn. I feel like I'm reinventing myself like Madonna. Just like be relevant over the years, right? Like 10 years is a long time. I mentioned COVID, the economy's up, the economy's down. We're a for-profit company, so that matters to us. We're a little bit more sensitive to that, I think. But just like figuring out your true North Star of helping people and students and communities, but what does that mean? So for us, I think COVID was a pivotal time. We still dug into K-12, but at that time, schools, like I was saying, was not working with outside organizations a lot. Fortunately, after COVID, through federal grants and programs, more schools did look outside. That was something that we could support Washington, D.C. students. But also that time forced, like, as a leader to be resourceful. Like, what other revenue streams, who else can we help in the world out there to just pay our bills and keep people on the payroll and feed my children, to be frank, guys. And around that time as well, I connected with the U.S. Air Force, teaching English to Vietnamese soldiers in Vietnam. So the U.S. Air Force program that trains military officers in their country English so that supports security cooperation goals. Vietnamese landed that contract. That has been such a blessing in so many ways. And so when I say it's better than ever, just being able to work with different kinds of communities where I come from in Vietnam is just so rewarding.
Yeah. You mentioned Camelback and all this and sort of the day one. And I remember the first day of for the very first cohort, you were in the first cohort, Larry, you were in the second cohort. And I remember I drove to the airport to pick you up.
I still remember that, Aaron.
And you had your son. He was like a baby. I don't know. Was he even a year old at that point? I don't remember.
Yeah.
But it makes me wonder. What made you apply to Camelback?
That what? I'm sorry.
What made you apply to Camelback way back when? How'd you find us? And then what made you apply?
So through networks, right? I think you knew one of my friends. It's about networks and communities. The power of people, guys. It's so understated, but it's so true. The power of people. Laura Jimenez. Thank you, girlfriend, for connecting me to Aaron. And through that, I found out about Camelback. And through that, I think I've referred folks who have been on Camelback later on. Just the power of people. Larry, I'm curious, how did you find out about Camelback?
In our early stages, we were pounding the pavement in regards to pitching and pitch competitions. So I think just the ecosystem and just being in different rooms with Aaron and hearing about the work. So whether that was through Propeller and their pitch competition, Idea Village, and 4.0. And I think just being in all those different spaces, I was in a lot of rooms with Aaron before I actually met Aaron. And I had heard of Camelback and Christina as well, my co-founder at the time. We were very familiar with the work, but I think just being in those different rooms and being a part of the ecosystem and a closer community, we knew about Camelback, and we knew it was a step that we was going to have to take at some point to get to the next level.
Yeah, each of you We'll talk a little bit about some of the changes. Tina, you were sort of mentioning, from going from transcend to learn to learn. Larry, you sort of talked about some of the stuff with public speaking when you were talking about your mom. I'd be curious, like how have you each grown as leaders over the years? Like when you look back at yourself, what do you see as different?
Tina, you want to go first, or?
Sure. I think for me, I think the theme that I've learned is the more you give, the more you get. And so the more you serve others, you will be served. And whether that's explicit or implicit, the energy that you have, like people know and they can see. And so if you ask me how I changed as a leader in the beginning, it's like, here's what I want to accomplish. Here's what I want to do for my community. Here's the visions that I have. Now it's more like, how can I help? Like, how can I be a good enough person? And I say that in the most positive way, to recruit wonderful people around me that I get to work with so that we can build something bigger. It's a different mindset. And I'm thankful for that growth.
What about you, Larry?
Yeah, it's been so many lessons and through this journey, man. And I would say one big one would be my emotional intelligence, and just there's an etiquette that comes with just moving in this space and connecting with other folks and networking and things of that nature. And I think I was like very emotional in my early space because you don't know, right? Especially if you don't come from these traditional talent pipelines or top 25 schools, when you kind of just get dropped off. I was a very raw, and I'm still growing, but I remember in the early stages, I was very raw in regards to just dealing with people, networking, and the etiquette that came with that, the vernacular that came with that. There's a language, I think, that comes with moving into different rooms that we move in, talking to investors, just things as simple as like getting time from folks, right? And wanting a certain response in a certain amount of time, and not understanding that folks are busy just like you are. And so I think I was very immature and very infant-like in that regard. And it took me some time to understand that like people are busy. Give people grace in that regards. And I think that's one of my biggest issues and biggest growth areas, along with a slew of others. Punctuality, being on time, how much that meant. And not taking other folks' time for granted. It's just, and it just comes with growth and experience and maturity.
Yeah. One of the things I've seen, Larry, just on social media and stuff, is it seemed like you sort of embraced this idea of being high risk, the high risk CEO. Can you tell me more about like how that got started? What made you sort of embrace that moniker?
Just the journey, Aaron, the journey. I've been thrown so many obstacles, Aaron, and I think indirectly and directly, me on my growth trajectory and being in different spaces, and like I alluded to earlier, I came in very raw, and I think overall, the spaces that we go into, right, the fellowship, whether that's the fellowship spaces, and these sort of talent pipeline spaces where you get cultivated and you develop as a leader, I came in very raw, and I just think a combination of my aesthetic and my untraditional sort of disposition and trajectory that I brought to the space. I told you a little bit about my story. I think all of that, having the background that I've had, and just taking up space the way I do. I think in some rooms, being very vocal, very powerful in the work. I think in some regards, people in the space saw me as high risk, and that was the messaging that I got in regards to, in the early days where I came in, very, very bold, very audacious, very outspoken, sort of like ignorance being bliss, me not knowing any better, and just coming into the space and taking these signals through conversations and dialogue with folks. I was an outcast in a lot of regards as far as my story and how I went about doing the work. So that's how the whole high risk moniker came about. I just kind of embraced and leaned into my story, being untraditional, and taking some pride in that.
Yep. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I saw that, I was just like, this is like brilliant in a lot of ways, because you start to neutralize that narrative when you own it, and then it sort of forces people to engage with you, or like, come up with another excuse. you know
Absolutely. Absolutely. It
um,
draws a line.
you know and so Tina, you mentioned this idea of giving, and sort of like, sort of part of your growth is, you know moving in some ways from like, this is what I want to do, to thinking about how you can give to others. And I think for me, many of my proudest moments is just thinking about all the opportunities I've had to give to folks like yourself, to give to the 163, I think at this point, and growing number of fellows that we have to work with. And a lot of times people ask me about Camelback, and I'm like, well, I can show you better than I can tell you. And being able to be with folks like yourself is like the best demonstration of that. I'm wondering for each of you, and I'll start with you, Tina, on this. Is there someone, or is there a story, or a person, or a family, or a student that you think of that kind of exemplifies the impact that your company has been able to have? And love to sort of hear that story.
Gosh, there's so many. I don't even know. I mean, I think, well, obviously, like our students in DC, like our biggest programs are our Reach in DC, and then also our programs in Vietnam, both of which I'm very proud of, and the students we work with. But honestly, Erin, I also feel like, as the organization has evolved, I also get the privilege to work with colleagues and recruit colleagues and give opportunities to colleagues that they wouldn't have before. So I think for me, an example would be like my team in Vietnam. So my team in Vietnam, so we do provide English language training in Vietnam for the U.S. Air Force for Vietnamese military soldiers that are partnered with the U.S. And it's like, cooperation on security matters. So it's a feel-good kind of project, and a wonderfully important project too. But what I love is the reason why our program, Lana Learns program, is different from all the other English language training programs that I am aware of worldwide, is that when we came in, we strategically hired or recruited wonderful English instructors locally. So they just had to be native English speakers. And so on our roster, we have one American, we have a couple of South African, we have British. But what makes me really happy is that we were able to not only support our students, but now we're creating a community where maybe our expat instructors, the consistent thing they say is this is a wonderful opportunity for them as professionals to grow. And for me, that means so much, because that means that when you grow an organization, yes, you're impacting the students and the mission, but as you grow the organization, you're also growing opportunities for people. You're creating jobs. You're creating stronger communities. Now my instructors are wonderful and engaged because we gave them a better or a different opportunity than they had before. And then I'm looking forward to like the next phase of growth. So for me, it's exciting to see the multifaceted ways as an organization grows and as your platform grows, that you support people in the entire network.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Now, Larry, for you, what would you say you're most proud of at Brothers Empowered to Teach? Is there a student or a brother that you've gotten to get into the classroom that you think really exemplifies the work?
Yeah, absolutely, man. There's so many examples. Alex Hall said, Jerome Perkins, Jared Jupiter. I think like there's so many stories, because our work is so layered. Right, like Tina's work, but our work is so layered. So much of our work is leading young men as well, not just creating educators, but young men coming into our space looking for development, looking for guidance, and the relationships that are built within that, and the adulting one-on-one that has to go into creating a great educator, man. So I get a chance. It's really special. I get a chance to not only develop a great educator, but develop a young man. We take a very holistic approach to that. When somebody comes into our cypher space, our personal development space, we're taking on that young man as a whole, and all the issues and all the wins and losses that comes with that experience. But I think about I'll just pick one, Jared Jupiter, right now, who's currently our board chair. We've seen sort of every phase of his growth. He came in early on. He was a participant at the honorary program at SUNO. He came into our program 2015, 2016, early childhood educator, fell in love with the program, continued to develop, we continue to support him. He's now going through our alumni program, which was birthed out of COVID, where we decided to make a reinvestment into some of the folks who've already matriculated and are still currently teaching. And now he's our board chair, and I'm just really excited to see the lens that he brings, his anecdotal experience. He's been a fellow, been an alum, and now sits on the board side of things, on the business side of things, and that's I think that sort of just, it encapsulates like the mission, the representation piece, the growth, the development, the wins within the wins, him graduating school, him being an educator, him now getting more experience, expanding his scope and his lens for what an educator actually is, not just somebody who's leading in front of the classroom, but somebody who's also getting involved in policy and legislation and the executive side of the work as well, man. And that's like multiple wins in one, if you will. And we're just looking to create more Jared Jupiters, more Jerome Perkins, more Alex Halsteads. I love the work that we do, man. I really do.
Definitely. I could feel that from you. And I remember going to the 10-year anniversary at the end of last year, and just like the love that you had built in that room, the young men who were proud to be teachers. I was a teacher at one point in my career too, and it was like, I think the numbers are still the same. I started in the classroom in 2003, and I think it was like less than 2% of teachers were Black men, and it's 2025, and I think that the numbers are still the same, right? So the question that I want to ask y'all next is, if you could give advice to yourself in year 1, year 2, year 3, looking back 10 plus years into this journey, what would it be?
I'll jump on that first, Aaron. I think for me is just give myself grace. There is no copy and paste template to success. Everybody's journey starts at a different point. Everybody's going to deal with different adversities and calamities, and life is going to life, right? That's one thing. Entrepreneurship doesn't exempt you from life still being difficult. And I just think folks, as BIPOC minority entrepreneurs, if you will, not coming from these traditional spaces where we're familiar with the spaces that we're going into, is just really giving yourself grace. There's a lot to be learned. There's a lot of development that goes into this leadership, like what leadership looks like, leading people, and then having the other competencies that you need to be successful as well: fundraising, develop budgeting, branding, marketing, public speaking, all of it. We need to give ourselves some grace in this journey, man, because it is difficult.
I appreciate that. What would you say, Tina?
Yeah, I think the fact that we're here and that we're celebrating 10 years is a testament to just don't give up. I mean, it's 10 years because we literally just didn't give up, and we kept pushing. And when COVID happened, or, donations or sales were low, we just kept persevering. And that's just the testament of keep going on so that we can actually have this conversation.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think sometimes we think that the key is, some insight to be gained from a Harvard Business Review article or something really, heady and academic. And I agree with both what you're saying is sometimes it's just like, be kind with yourself, and also just put one foot in front of the other. That sometimes the person who wins is just the person who keeps going.
Absolutely.
Very true.
So, Aaron, just curiously, in the last 10 years of Camelback, do you have a time or a story that really encapsulates that? Just one foot in front of the other and keep going so that we can get to the point where we're celebrating now?
Yeah. I mean, look, the reality is that Camelback is the third venture that I've started. Right. And so, sometimes you get into these spaces and the story starts with Camelback and it's like all up and to the right and it's great and everything worked out. But the reality is that a lot of what I sort of built in Camelback and a lot of my motivation was my first 2 startups and, failing and being in spaces where I was like, I don't know what to do. I don't know how to get this money. and sort of seeing a lot of people who were just like me, who look like me, who had similar stories, and sort of using that as motivation to sort of say, well, like, what if I could create something that wasn't just about like me, but was about unleashing the power of a lot of great entrepreneurs out there who like have all the genius and have all the talent, but just don't necessarily have the access. And so, did I know it at the time when those first two ideas were, crashing and burning? Absolutely not. Walled in too many snacks and, judge shows to like sort of self-soothe myself. But little did I know at that time that it was just preparing me for something even greater. But sometimes you don't realize that till you get there.
And Aaron, I would like to follow up on that question. Like, what do you think your biggest? No, I'm gonna go in another direction. What's next for you, Aaron? I think a lot of people want to know. So I'm gonna use this opportunity.
Good question,
I'm really
Larry.
curious. Like, what's and I know you're gonna stay high level, Aaron. I know you're gonna stay high level and keep it very broad and big. But I'm gonna poke the bear. Like, folks want to know what's next for you? You've had tremendous success with Camelback. This is your third venture, like you said. You've learned a lot. How are you going to take these lessons, and what's the next move for Aaron Walker?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I have come to understand at a deeper level is the importance of capital, and that capital, I think, is the most enduring, but also the most flexible form of power that there is. And I think that sometimes in impact spaces, we kind of wrestle with our relationship with capital for a lot of reasons, and that's a very nuanced thing, and we could probably have a whole conversation about that. But what I've tried to lead into is sort of saying that, I think I have an ability to raise money. I think I have an ability to use capital to help other people build their ideas. And I think it's important that, folks from marginalized and minoritized communities have the ability to use capital to further their vision, but also like build capital for themselves and their families and their communities. And so that sort of brings me to some of the stuff that I'm working on now around building a fund and being able to go from writing $40,000 checks at Camelback to writing $250, $500 million checks into the same kinds of entrepreneurs, and being able to kind of take what I did at Camelback and just build on it and sort of say that the work that Camelback's doing is important and necessary, and there's a lane for that work, but there's also other pieces of this entrepreneurial journey that need a Camelback too, and how can I fill it in those ways?
Appreciate that, man. I want to take my opportunity before we wrap up as well, man, to say thank you, Aaron, for Camelback, the Camelback family, everything you've done for the organization, for Brothers in Power to Teach, and for Larry Irvin and the leadership journey that I've been on. A lot of the behind the scenes things that I've been through, Aaron, and some of my darkest moments, man. You've been in my corner. Your wife, Ify, y'all opened your doors up to me. There's something I'll never forget. And y'all been behind this organization and myself and Larry Irvin, because they are that is two different conversations. I think you have the organization, and then you have the leader, and that's a whole nother story as far as what my journey has been, man. And I just really want to extend my appreciation and gratitude to you and Ify opening your doors, man, at one of my darkest times, and hearing me and seeing me as a leader, as a Black male in this space that didn't have many answers. And we're looking for answers, man. Aaron, I thank you. You've remained in my corner. The whole Camelback team, man. It's not overstated to say we definitely wouldn't be here without that springboard that Camelback was for us, putting us in positions, putting us in front funders that I know we wouldn't have. I didn't have those connections. Nobody in my immediate circle had those connections, putting us in front of funders, cleaning us up from a pitch standpoint. From a complete organizational standpoint, man, Camelback was catalyst and has been catalyst and continues to be, one of our flagship partners in this work, man. We thank you. We thank the entire team, the entire movement. Please keep doing what you're doing.
No, thank you. Thank you. All day, every day, twice on Sunday. Awesome. Well,
Yeah,
it was a
He
pleasure.
said it better than I could ever. So thank you, Larry. Absolutely. Yes. Plus 1,000% of what Larry said.
Y'all are keeping me alive too. So just as much as it is us and me and the Camelback team giving. You're giving to us and giving us purpose too. So with that, I want to say thank you for your time, thank you for your support, thank you for the last 10 years. Camelback really is not anything without the team that we have, without the fellows, and so I want to express my deep gratitude to you today and for what you've done and for what you will do. I hope that you are able to join us for all the 10-year festivities that we have going on in 2025. We'll be in a lot of different places this year, celebrating, including at Guardian Summit, which is taking place this year in June 11th and 12th in New Orleans. It won't be snowing then, but it will be a good time. So I hope that you're able to join us. I hope that everyone here who is listening to this conversation can join and celebrate with us too.